distribution strategy and look at what might impact the success of our distribution channel choice. We will also provide an overview of some additional available tools and theories that we as marketers can use when determining the channel choice of a product or a service. So let's start. What is the purpose of distribution strategy? And what is the connection to the rest of the marketing mix? When you are asked to design the marketing mix, you need to make decisions on 4 or 7 core elements, also known as the 4 or the 7 Ps. First of all, any issues concerning the product. This would include packaging and all other elements in connection with the product. Secondly, a decision on price. Thirdly, you will need to decide on the place, which is what this video will address. We will also need to make a plan of which promotional activities we will carry out in order to tell our customers about our product and encourage them to buy. If we're dealing with an offering that is better described as a service, or perhaps a product that includes large elements of service, we might also want to look at the additional 3 Ps. The people that are involved in delivering the service, the process that our customers will go through in order to receive our service, and the physical evidence, any visible or tangible elements that the customer will see, hear, or in other ways experience when receiving the service. None of the 4 or the 7 Ps should be decided on in isolation. However, place is the P which we will focus on in this video. So, why is it important to make sure we choose the right distribution channels? Let us use an example. This business produces French cakes and desserts. In these modern production facilities, well-educated confectioners develop recipes and create delicious cakes and desserts ready to be sold and distributed to cake-loving customers. What will impact the success of the chosen distribution channels? And subsequently, which considerations are relevant when making their choice of distribution setup? Let us imagine that they had the idea of selling their cakes and desserts in rural areas through roadside self-service booths where customers were expected to show up and purchase the products without any assistance. In this case, we could argue that they should first of all have considered some market factors. Firstly, what is the location and concentration of their customers? Is it likely that they will be able to sell to a suitable amount of customers with this kind of setup? Secondly, do their customers expect to buy these types of cakes and desserts at roadside booths? If not, it could be a challenge to convince them of the value in doing so. Thirdly, we would advise them to consider whether the customers would be able to get the information and service expected when using this type of setup. Our recommendation for French Cakes Corporation would, amongst other factors, depend on their answers to these questions about market factors. Let us imagine another scenario where French Cakes are considering establishing a chain of French Cakes cafes, through which they will sell their cakes and desserts. In addition to the market factors which we have already discussed, we as marketers would also advise them to consider some factors about themselves. Firstly, do they have the required resources to undertake such an investment, regarding both time, money, and people? Secondly, what level of control do they desire from their distribution channel? Owning the distribution channel gives ultimate control, but it comes at a price. Thirdly, we might discuss with them whether their product range is wide enough to meet customers' needs. So, our recommendations for this company would, amongst other factors, also depend on their answers to these questions about themselves. We could also imagine that the company were keen on creating an online web shop, where their customers could order their cakes and desserts and get them delivered directly to their homes. In addition to the market and producer factors which we have already discussed, we would also advise them to consider some factors about the actual products. Firstly, does the perishability, the fairly short shelf life of a cake or dessert, suit this type of distribution? Would they be able to deliver the product while it's still edible? Would there be ways of overcoming this obstacle? Secondly, are cakes and desserts suitable for handling in this way? And thirdly, with other types of products, complexity could be an issue. So our recommendation for this company would, in addition to the factors already discussed, also depend on the answers to the questions about the actual products. We might also imagine that the company is keen on distributing their products through supermarkets in order to reach a large number of people from their target group in this way. In addition to the previously discussed factors, we would also ask them to consider some facts about their competitors. Firstly, which channels are their competitors using? And secondly, is it possible to achieve differentiation through choice of channel? Let us imagine that in one particular supermarket chain, consumers are not exposed to the competitors' cakes or desserts. Distributing the products through this chain would therefore enable them to differentiate from the competition and ultimately have a better chance of selling their products to the end consumers. So our recommendation for French Cakes Corporation would, in addition to the other already mentioned factors, also depend on their answers to these questions about the competitors. So, when advising the company on their choice of distribution channels, we would look at some market factors, some factors about the French Cakes Corporation itself, factors about the products, and some factors in connection with the competitive situation. And finally, we would look at the rest of the marketing mix to ensure that the choice of place corresponds with how French Cakes Corporation wishes to be positioned in the minds of the customers. We have now established the purpose of distribution strategy, what it is and why we need to know about it, and we have established that there are many factors which we need to look at before we can decide on the best place to distribute our product or service. So let's move on. In addition to the factors we have just discussed, we as marketers have some additional tools and theories we can use to guide us when determining which distribution channels to use. These will not be described in detail in this video, but let us just introduce an overview of some of the tools and theories we might want to use. We would determine whether we are dealing with consumer, B2B, and/or services distribution channels. Distribution intensity should be looked at. To what extent and in which context do we want our product or service to be available to the end consumers? Thirdly, we would consider whether to use independent intermediaries, setting up a franchise operation, or perhaps go for channel ownership. We should also look at the physical distribution system, which would include decisions on transportation of goods, inventory issues, and order processing procedures. If we're dealing with retail, we could also look at the process of retail differentiation. Finally, we should also look at how we could manage the relationships with our chosen distribution channels, so that it remains prosperous for both us and for the different parties within the channel. We have now established an understanding of the purpose of distribution strategy, the different factors that impacts our choice, and lastly we have presented an overview of some additional tools and theories available to us when determining a suitable place to distribute our product or service. To learn more about distribution strategy and how to...
Okay, so that just gives you kind of a broad picture of distribution. I've got one more little short one to show y'all. Starbucks is probably one of the, they have just got, you know, advertising and marketing down to a fine art. They've got their logo. If you can see their logo, you know, a mile away on the highway. It's always really tall, so you know it's up there, and you see green, you know it's a Starbucks. So I'm going to show you a little short thing on how, on the process used through distribution with Starbucks. I think. Let's see. May have to. Okay, got lucky.
most powerful lessons I could ever pass on to you about building a successful business that makes a significant amount of money. But please note, this video has almost nothing to do with affiliate marketing or selling digital products. Those are the tools. But today I'm going to give you something far more valuable. A completely new way to look at your business. Most people think Starbucks is in the coffee business. They're not. Coffee is their product, but their business is actually distribution and real estate. Those stores represent Starbucks' distribution channel. Television, YouTube, Facebook are distribution channels. These are the mediums in which marketing messages flow and goods are sold to a participating audience. So if Starbucks wants to sell more coffee, they must expand their channel by opening more stores. Without those stores, there is no business. Same with McDonald's. Same with Walmart. All of these companies have figured out that their real business is their distribution channel through which goods and services are sold. We need to remember that as well, as it's the key to building a business that makes $400,000 in a week instead of one that only makes $400. The miracle of building a business in the internet age is that it allows a single person to build a massive global virtual distribution channel with nothing more than a laptop. Christina, a full-time mom with 2 kids, and has spent the past 2 years writing a few books on parenting tips for new mothers. Now that her books are done, her primary goal has been to sell those books and bring in some revenue. Most people, especially small business owners, would agree with that logic. You create a product or service, and then you focus on selling it. But there's a reason that the average annual revenue for a small business in the US is only $44,000, and there's a reason why it is not turned into millions. She thinks her business is selling books. It's not. Her books are a product, but a product is never a business. Here's what I mean. To demonstrate the difference between building a business where the primary focus is on selling books and building a business where the primary focus is on building a distribution channel. Christina could sell her book on Amazon.com and the Kindle store for $9.95. For every sale, she makes a 70% profit, or $7 per book. In order to make $7,000 per month, she would have to find a way to sell 1,000 books per month, or 33 books per day. She doesn't get any of her customers' information such as their name or email address, so her only way to make money is to constantly sell books every single day. She might be able to spend some of that $7 in profit on advertising, but that will decrease her profits down to $1 or $2 per book if she's lucky. This is not a business, and yet it's what tens of thousands of authors attempt to do each and every day. Now let's take another approach. Instead of focusing on book sales, let's focus on building her distribution channel, which in the case is a list of moms who subscribe to her free email newsletter. By sending her readers valuable information via email on a regular basis, Christina can build a solid relationship with them. She can become known, liked, and trusted for the value she provides. This is called goodwill. And goodwill is everything when it comes to the value of your distribution channel. Because if people know, like, and trust you, they will buy from you. On average, an email subscriber to Christina's list will be worth $1 per month in revenue if she maintains a high level of goodwill. If she has a list of 5,000 readers, she should be able to make around $5,000 per month by promoting goods and services that would benefit her readers. 20,000 readers equals $20,000 per month, and so forth. Over the course of a year, that means each subscriber is worth $12. This is possible because people tend to stay in your distribution channel and consume your products and services for as long as you continue to create goodwill. So how can we use Christina's book to build her email list? Simple. If each free email subscriber is worth at least $12 per year and her book customers are only worth $7 total, then it makes a heck of a lot more sense to just give away the book for free in exchange for their email address. With the addition of a second product that she can offer her new subscribers for $20 to $50, she will be able to afford to actively market her free book on Facebook's advertising platform and rapidly increase the speed of her list growth to hundreds of new subscribers per day. Within the next 12 months, she should have a list of around 100,000 subscribers, which should produce around $100,000 per month in revenue. Anytime she creates a new product or comes across someone else that she'd like to recommend, she can do so just by sending out a single email. But it gets significantly more interesting when you start to focus on turning those free email subscribers into actual customers. Their value goes from $12 per year to well over $100 to $1,000. So let me walk you through an actual real-world case study. The great thing about building a distribution channel that generates revenue, rather than a product that generates revenue, is that you can leverage the amazing products and services that others have spent the time to create. This is typically called affiliate marketing, which was pioneered by Amazon.com almost 20 years ago. Basically, you can promote someone's product or service and get paid a commission for every sale. If it's a digital product like an ebook or an online course, that commission is typically going to be 50%. So if the product costs $50, you'd make a $25 commission. When it comes to promoting a product to your list as an affiliate, there's two important rules you need to keep in mind. 1. Only promote products that you've personally bought and checked out for quality. 2. Only promote products because you believe they will provide a real tangible benefit to the people on your list. Not for money, but because you know it will help them achieve their ultimate goal. Failure to follow these rules will result in the loss of goodwill and could even destroy it completely. Finally, I included a photo within the email to provide proof that I personally used the product. This went a long way in readers' minds to solidify the product's value and credibility. Anytime you can show photos or a video of your personal use, do so. It will likely increase your sales by at least 100 to 200%.
Okay, so I've tried to figure out why they call that about Starbucks, but I thought it was a good video, so I show it anyway. But they start out telling you about Starbucks, and then they go on to something else, I guess leading to how maybe Starbucks created it, or maybe they've just nicknamed it that. But at any rate, I think it's a great video showing you, because a lot of people think that they can make money, just by writing a book and then sell X amount of books. If you've ever watched Shark Tank, they often say, this is a good product, but it's just a product. It's not a business. Like one product typically is not going to make you a millionaire. But once you develop, you have these distribution channels, which basically are today's influencers. And you hear a lot about influencers who advertise. They have these huge followings and they advertise products and they get money for advertising those products, and they make a lot of money doing that. And the more people they get on their list, the more money that they make. I'm not real familiar with it. I don't know anyone personally that does it, but I read a lot about it. Like for instance, I can't think what her name is, the movie star that maybe somebody remembers, that her daughter was an influencer, but she ended up paying money to get her into Southern California University, I think. And had to go to jail. Anybody know who I'm talking about?
I remember who you're talking about, but I don't remember her name, but I know who you're
Right.
talking about. Yeah.
Her
Okay.
name is Lori Loughlin.
There you go. Thank you, Lori Loughlin. Well, her daughter was an influencer for Sephora or Revlon or somebody, right? Anybody remember? No.
I read up on this, and her daughter, she was just like a YouTuber.
Uh-huh.
And so she was endorsed by a lot of brands. So by Sephora or L'Oreal or any beauty companies out there.
Uh-huh.
And but then I heard that even though her parents had done that for her, they did it for both her and her sister.
Right.
They paid for both of their admissions.
Right. Under the table. Right. So yeah, exactly. Well, when that happened though, I think she lost all those endorsements. And so, you have to be really careful, with your life, even when you're doing something like that. So anyway, I thought it was interesting. Okay, so what we're going to talk about, yeah, Araya said the woman from Full House. You're right. And boy, they play Full House on TV a lot now. Mercy me, it's on one of those channels every time you turn it on. And Fuller House. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to go over the PowerPoint. I'm going to hit the high points on it, and because it's pretty well easy to understand, I think, but I want to try to give you all some real world examples so it'll bring it home for you. And remember that distribution is the place. When you're looking at price, product, place, promotion, well, the distribution is the place. And the distribution channel is actually, basically, if you want to think about it in a real easy way, it's what it takes for the product or service to get from the producer to the ultimate user, the customer, the client, the patient. So that's what your distribution channel is. How did that product or service get from the originator to the user? And if you remember that, then it'll kind of all fall into place. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again, I hope, and we're going to talk about some of the main points of the chapter. Give me just a second to catch up over here. I got two computers going to keep me together here. And one of them is acting kind of squirrely on me. Okay. All right. All right, so the channel of distribution, again, is the path the product takes as it travels from the manufacturer to the consumer. And this path can be any number of ways, but let's just take an example of, let's take Advil, for example. Now, Advil is produced by Procter & Gamble, whoever produces it. I don't know who makes it. And, but it's not necessarily, all the parts of even Advil aren't necessarily made at one place. They might get the capsule. If you get the one in capsules, it might be shipped in from China, and the medicine that goes in the capsule might be made somewhere else. And then they come together at a manufacturing plant and create the pill. Well, then once that's done, it might move on to a wholesaler. The wholesaler is an intermediary that buys it directly from the manufacturer, and they pay, of course, a cheaper price because they buy huge amounts of it, so they get a lower price. Well, once the wholesaler gets it, then that Advil is going to have to get to a distributor. And the distributor might be, for instance, let's say Target. Like Target has their own distributors. So the Target distributor would purchase it from the wholesaler. And then once the distributor gets it, they tag a little bit more onto it, and it goes out to the store where you ultimately get it. So, or the buyer ultimately gets it. So that is the path that bottle of aspirin took from when it was made to when it gets to your hands as you check out. So that's known as your channel of distribution. And again, remember that the place element in the marketing mix is your channel of distribution, because that's how that medicine or that service or whatever it is going to get to you. And in today's world, there's all kinds of different types of channels of distribution that we didn't have 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. For instance, if you're in healthcare and you need to speak to a doctor, 20 years ago, the only choice you had if you wanted to see a doctor was make an appointment and go to his office or go to the emergency room or, somewhere where he was at or she was at. And so in today's world, you can see a doctor on your iPad. They've got all these different apps. And since the pandemic, the apps have increased like tenfold to what they were before the pandemic, because people didn't want to go to the doctors. They didn't want to go to, if you had a sore throat, you didn't want to take a chance on going to the doctor and getting COVID, So these apps where you could speak to a doctor through the web became much more appealing to individuals. So, you can look at them on your iPad, on your computer, on your iPhone, just, any number of ways that you don't actually have to get out of your house and go see a doctor. And it's become more and more advanced. For instance, now there's a product that you can look at an otoscope for your phone that actually you can put in your ear, and it transfers or shows that information to the doctor, and he can see if you have an ear infection or whatever it happens to be. They also have like stethoscopes that hook up to your iPhone, and probably the Androids too. The book talked about the iPhone, but I'm sure they have it for the Androids also. But all these make it possible for you to see a doctor and get the same kind of examination that you would have if you got dressed, got in your car, had to go sit in the doctor's office, had to park your car, all those different kinds, be exposed to other things and expose people to whatever you have. So all of this is the changing landscape, of healthcare right now. In the traditional consumer product, it's how and where the product or service is accessed by the consumer. If you're looking for a bottle of aspirin, then you're going to probably either go to a drugstore or to the Target or to Walmart or maybe to Amazon, but you're going to not buy it directly from the manufacturer. So it's going to have been through some sort of channel of distribution. In the healthcare, it's the path that a patient takes before he or she accesses the appropriate level of care. So, I can't see y'all because I don't have two screens, but let's say, for instance, that you wake up and you kind of got a scratchy throat and you're thinking, oh, I don't want to go to the doctor. So the first thing you do might be go to WebMD and look at the symptoms and see, well, it could be this, it could be that, but kind of narrow it down. And then after you do that, you might think, well, maybe I better get a professional opinion. So you might go to one of the apps that, lets you see a doctor on the screen. You might go to an urgent care clinic, but you make choices that the patient or the consumer now makes choices that maybe they used to not make because you have these other options available to you. So it might take, let's say if you're feeling really poorly, like you think you can't even get out of bed, you're gonna have to drag yourself to the emergency room, then you're gonna use, directly to the doctor at the emergency room. But if it's just something, that's just, you feel kind of rotten, but you don't know exactly what it is, then, you have other choices now. Now, the channels will vary in length, and the length is determined by how many intermediaries there are. For instance, the example that I gave you with the Advil, you have the production, and then you have the wholesaler, and then you have the distributor, and then you have the end product. To the ultimate customer. In other situations, let's say that you saw some vitamins on TV that you thought would just what you need for whatever, maybe make your hair grow or whatever it happens to be. And so those might be a direct to consumer. You might order those directly from the people on the television. Now, they may or may not be the actual manufacturer. They may actually be like QVC or something, which is another intermediary, but just not as many channels that you're going through. So the channels vary in length, and that's determined by how many intermediaries there are between the production and when the consumer actually gets it. And if you have a direct channel, it's one that no one stands between the producer of the product and the ultimate consumer. This is when you go to your primary care physician, you go directly to them and he gives you the medicine wherever you need. So that is a direct channel. Okay, we good? Anybody got any questions on that so far? If I don't hear anybody hollering, I'm gonna keep on going. Okay, so again, here we've got direct channels, or when you go direct to the consumer. And this could be, your primary care doctor. And actually, two other direct channels might be CVS or Walgreens, because they now have urgent care clinics. So you would go directly to them to get a prescription or whatever it is that you need to do, that you need to make you feel better. Also, the book talks about how the internet is changing the nature of direct channels, so like it used to be just the primary care, but now it could be a Walgreens or it could be an app, that has a doctor on it. But so healthcare has changed a lot. Back in the early days. Like if any of you ever watched Little House on the Prairie or Gunsmoke or any of those old westerns, you know, like there was one country doctor is what they called him. And he had an office, but typically people didn't come to his office. He had that horse and buggy and he was out going to see people, house calls. And, you know, house calls were a thing up until maybe 50 years ago. Doctors were still making house calls. They would come see patients in the morning and then they would have office hours in the afternoon. And all that started changing. But as everything that what goes around comes around, you know, now we're back to some doctors are now having house calls. You know, they have mobile medical units and they come to you. So all things happen, you know, in cycles. But many years ago, that was what you had was, you know, it was house calls. They came to you. It was a whole different kind of system. But with the internet and with, like I said, the changing landscape, things are changing now. To apps, to the internet, to even kiosks. Mayo Clinic has kiosks that are in malls in different places that you can actually go to get a diagnosis or to see a doctor online. Then the indirect channels, of course, are when you have intermediaries, like what I was talking about earlier. You have the producer, the wholesaler, the reseller, and the consumer. And in between, you oftentimes have a distributor. It's producer, wholesaler, distributor, retailer, and then consumer. So, you know, it's two different ways now that people are accessing healthcare. Now, if you look at the functions in the channel, when they talk about place, they're talking about placing the major function is to place value by making it more accessible. And this would be clinics that have longer hours. Instead of closing at 5, they stay open until 10, or they stay open 24 hours a day. Then they have apps like Zoom Care, where you can chat with someone. And then if you still need to see one in person, that's part of that same system. They refer you upward to in person. Another thing that's gaining a lot of popularity now, especially in rural areas, are drones that deliver medication, or, you know, where instead of having to go and get it or having someone having to drive it to you, they actually program drones to take it to you, and then the drones know to come back to where they started. Kind of like carrier pigeons, I guess, you know, but they're used now. They're getting more and more popular in healthcare. And when you're talking about time, you know, you're looking at these intermediaries can store products till the consumer purchases them. And this would be like Target, you know, or Walmart or CVS or Walgreens, storing those Advil until you need them. Now, the book talks about that as being synchronous versus asynchronous, which should make sense to y'all. For instance, this class is synchronous because y'all get to come visit with me on Tuesdays every few weeks or every other week. And if you have perhaps my 457 or my 417 class, that's asynchronous. You only can visit with me if you request a time to chat with me, or if you call me or email me or whatever it happens to be, because asynchronous takes place at different times. There's no one gets together as a group like we do in this class. And it's the same thing when you're looking at purchases. The synchronous is when you go to the doctor, whereas asynchronous is when the interaction can be online, and maybe you're not actually seeing a doctor. You know, you're looking at information. You know, you're like WebMD or you know, the interaction is actually just takes place online, but not necessarily with anybody else. It might just be you and the doctor, or it may be information that's given to you and then you can pick it up at any time. You know, like a report is given to you, but you don't have to watch it immediately. So it can be asynchronous. That's the way you're looking at this, asynchronous, the way they're talking about the time that's involved. And then you've got, they also consider the interaction online is when you're having like post-op. They're using that a lot now. Used to, you had a surgery and you had to drag yourself out of the bed and back up to the hospital a couple of days later for a checkup. Now they're doing it online so that it's less time, less effort for everyone. Okay, then they talk about possession. And this is actually talks about that some intermediaries will provide credit. And what's happening now, I think I can't remember what I say from class to class, but because insurance policies now have such high deductibles, hospitals are going to a lot of debt because people can't pay the deductibles. And so they're trying to figure out a way that they can offer credit to consumers that would encourage them to get the credit to pay their deductible. So some are even offering no interest loans in order to decrease the defaults that are happening at hospitals in today's world. So when you're talking about possession, you're looking at the amount of uncompensated care, which adds to the overall bad debt for different medical facilities. And then finally, the fourth thing they talk about is form. And form is actually when you actually alter something to fit a specific consumer. And an example of this would be you have a prosthetic and you've got a child that needs it and it's made for, more adults. So it's altered before it's given to the child. So the product that was produced is not the exact product that is ultimately goes to the consumer. So that's called the form. An example that you can look at also, if you want to think of it on a different level, is if you go buy a suit at a store and it's too big in the waist or it's too little in the waist, and you have a tailor that either lets it out or takes it in, and that is they've changed the form of the original product to suit that individual consumer. Okay, so as we move on down, this comes straight from the book, and it just shows you some examples of synchronous and asynchronous trade-offs. And y'all can just look at that in the book, and it might make it a little bit more clear to you if you have any problems with it. Then we go on to functional shifting. And I'm going to just try to nutshell this for y'all. What it means, functional shifting, is that it's at some level of the channel, some of the functions that particular level does gets moved to a different intermediary. So when that's functional shifting is, they're basically saying a function of a particular area is being taken up by a different level in the intermediaries. So for instance, if one function is eliminated, then another intermediary is probably going to have to pick it up. An example the book gives us talks about credit. If the intermediary, the producer or the intermediary gives up the service of giving credit to the customer, someone else is going to have to pick it up. So either the producer is going to have to start extending credit, or the customer is going to have to assume the debt, and not be able to get credit from one of the intermediaries. So that's just the example that they gave, is when one function gets dropped by one of the intermediaries, somebody else has to pick it up, or it just doesn't, it's just not there anymore. Like for instance, you cannot get credit anymore. If you don't have the money to pay for the medicine, then you just won't get the medicine, basically is what it boils down to. But functional shifting is when any type of responsibility or function is moved from one level of the channel to another. Okay, now there are lots of different things are being done to manage healthcare. And one of the things that large employers are doing now is a lot of them have clinics on property, because they have done the numbers and figured out that it's cheaper for them to pay a physician to work for them on their payroll than it is to pay for their employees to go to physicians that are off property, where they have to go through paying the insurance and paying all the different expenses that go along with it if they have it all on property. My dentist, for instance, works for, he is 3 days a week or something like that. He is one of the major manufacturers of I think it's Mary Kay, or I don't know, one of those cosmetic companies. And they did the numbers and saw that it was less expensive to have a couple of dentists in a dentist's office on property for all their patients or their employees to go to than it was to pay for them to go off property to dentists that were not part of their system. A lot of large manufacturing companies actually have clinics with full-time physicians in them, or physicians assistants. And all of this, they're doing it in order to overall save the money that was costing them to provide that insurance to go outside of the system. Another one that's been changed is that up until about 2009, pharmacists did not give shots. But in today's world, you can get almost all your shots by just making an appointment at a pharmacy, CVS, Walgreens, wherever it happens to be. And the pharmacists themselves actually can give you almost all the shots. They can give you flu shots, they can give you COVID shots, they can give you, shingle shots, whatever it happens to be. And by doing that, what they've done is they've taken some of the stress off the doctor's offices, because you no longer have to make an appointment and go sit in the doctor's office waiting just to get a shot. Now you can make an appointment and be in and out of the pharmacy in minutes without, and it doesn't cost near as much to have the pharmacist give you the shot as if you saw a medical practitioner to give you the shot. You need to have, when you've got intermediaries involved, you need to have cooperation between physicians and hospitals. And because oftentimes there will be conflicts, and the conflicts in today's world oftentimes happen between the management and the clinicians. And when all of you are heading out to be administrators, healthcare administrators, and you're going to have conflict between the clinicians, because you're going to look at a situation and you're going to see that perhaps you think there's too many staffing, because the staffing is, you're way over on your budget, and the clinicians are going to be telling you that they can't do it without that many. So there's going to be a constant conflict. If you were to ever watch the TV show Diagnosis Murder, it's an old show, but it comes on in the mornings now. And that's one of the only shows I've seen that actually has a lot of storylines around the hospital administrator. And they're always harassing him because he's always trying to save money, or he's trying to get donations, or get them to be involved in getting donations, all kinds of things like that. But his job is actually, pretty realistic, as to what your world might be like at some point, because people don't like someone telling them that they're spending too much money when they feel like they're barely making it as it is and giving good service. So there will be conflict. Now, when you're looking at the intensity of distribution, you're looking at how much expenditure is a customer willing to make to look for a particular product. When you look at intensive, that one is customer really doesn't think much about those products. There's a bunch of them there. This is like when you're standing in line at Target or Walmart or wherever you're at, and there's 2 or 3 people, 4 or 5 in front of you, the line's long, and you're thinking, oh, I forgot to buy gum. Well, you're not going to get out of that line and go to the candy area where they have a big selection of gum. You're probably going to take whatever is on that counter right there as you're going up to the checkout, because there's no way most people will give up their space in line to go get a particular kind of gum. You'll either buy what's there right there in front of you, or you won't buy it at all. So there's very little thought that goes into things like, buying gum or buying aspirin, or, you just kind of grab what's most available. So that makes the product is very available to the ultimate consumer, and the consumer doesn't have to think about it. Now, as you move on down the line, as far in terms of what people are effort they're willing to expend, you get to selective. Now, selective is when the consumer actually typically will compare products. A good example of this would be you want a new computer. You're probably not going to walk into Best Buy and look at the first computer you see and say, this one's perfect, I'll take this. You probably have looked online and seen what you want. Maybe you want a 1 terabyte hard drive. Maybe you want, a Mac instead of a PC, whatever it happens to be, but you're going to have done some research first. You will have expended some effort in order before you go out and spend that kind of money. If you put that on a healthcare basis, that's like you're looking for a specialty clinic. Let's look at, you've decided that you want to have your wrinkles ironed out on your face. And so you want to go to a plastic surgeon. You're not going to look for the cheapest one. Not anybody's going to look for the cheapest one, because then you're not going to be assured that you're going to get a quality surgery. You're going to look at reviews. You're going to look at location. You're going to look at a lot of things. So you're going to be much more selective than if you were just buying a pack of gum. And then the third thing you look at is exclusive. And this is places that are exclusive, like, for instance, the Menninger Mental Health Clinic in Houston is known worldwide. It's very exclusive. So, it's only used by particular people. It's, like people that need it for that purpose. They don't take everybody. It's a very exclusive place to go. And there's other types of medical facilities like that also, specialty clinics and specialty facilities. If you put it in a consumer products, you can let's look at Tiffany's. Tiffany only handles the very best watches, the Rolex, the Girard Piquet, only the best of the best. Their diamonds are the Tiffany diamonds. They're all very exclusive. And so, you don't just walk into Tiffany's typically and pick up the first thing you see. You do a lot of research. Okay, so that's looking at the intensity of distribution. Come on. Oh, come on. Now it's acting up on me. Okay. And then this is just, as you look at it more again in healthcare, you've got sometimes primary groups will have multiple satellite facilities. I'm from a little town in Texas called Temple. We had a hospital there that was very well known. It was Scott and White. They've since been bought out by Baylor Medical Group. But when they were Scott and White, Texas is very different from California in that when you're in Los Angeles and then you're, all of a sudden you go from Long Beach to, Costa Mesa to Anaheim, there's very little, like you don't even know when you've gone from city to city to city for the most part, unless you just know where you're going. But in Texas, towns are like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour apart, where you don't see anything but pastures, rattlesnakes, cows, jackrabbits. There's not any kind that's open territory. So that you've left one town and are going into another one. And so this Scott and White opened multiple satellite facilities in these small towns because the community hospitals all over the United States are closing, for various reasons. They don't have enough money. It's difficult. There's not enough business to keep them open because the communities are small. So these bigger hospitals are opening up these satellite facilities that, might do just one or two things in particular. Maybe, maybe they are like a place that'll do health exams or physicals or, but something that maybe minor things like sore throat, something like that you don't need a major hospital for. But anything beyond the very typical minor things, then the patients are referred back to the major hospital that satellite belongs to. You can also have satellite facilities that are in the same town that just have extended hours, or maybe they're open on weekends, or they're easier to access than the major hospitals, so less time consuming. So all of this is part of how they choose to have distribution. Now, exclusive distribution is when you have a product or service that has highly restricted number of outlets. That would be like highly specialized medical services. You know, these could be, you know, orthopedic centers. They could be, you know, cancer centers. They could be any number of things, but they're highly specialized medical services that, you know, that not everybody goes to. You know, they take more effort to use those. And then you have the selective distribution, which is hybrid. And this is actually a combination of the intensive and the exclusive. It's more than one location, but they are specific networks. Again, like maybe they've contracted with somebody to do cancer care, or maybe some other, they're like around and they're easier to get to, but they're also specialized. So then that's what they're considering the hybrid. And the book says that hospitals have specific networks that do this. And before they'll let them be in that network, if they've contracted with somebody, they have to be certain that they are doing everything exactly, following the same rules and procedures that the main hospital follows. Okay, when you're looking at vertical marketing, that just talks about the channels where the intermediaries are so integrated that their functions are performed at the most efficient place in the channel. So everything is done from start to finish in that channel, and it's efficient. Things aren't duplicated. And these are all driven by the savings that you have, the production cost savings, the transaction cost savings focus on the economies, then the use across different care points. For instance, the continuity of care is basically what it is. You know, that started a few years back, where at one time when you had, you would go to a primary care doctor and they would have a bunch of tests run, then they would send you to a specialist and they would sometimes have those same tests run. So insurance companies and different payers were saying, wow, we've already paid for this x-ray and the same x-ray, the same blood work and the whole work. So they had to figure out a way to not be have all duplication and thereby save a lot of money. And this is like your the continuity of care. Everybody sees everything and it's all passed through the channels. So when you're looking at, then it goes on to talk about market imperfections. And these are anything, these are regulatory constraints, things that you don't have any control over. You know, they're just like, for some reason, you can't get hold of some kind of information, maybe HIPAA, or you've got some sort of market power on the buyer or seller that they don't have the ability to get to some sort of medicine or service or whatever it happens to be. No market is perfect when you're looking at continuity care. There's always going to be hiccups in it. Now, one of the things that the book talked about was vertical forward integration. And this is when the operations that are acquired are closer to the final consumer. For instance, this is when you have a primary care center that's closer to the ultimate consumer than to the hospital. So when you're looking at vertical forward, I'm trying to explain this where it makes sense. You're looking at whatever service the consumer goes to first. And then from that service, they're moved on. Like if you go to a primary care center and they say, oh, your leg's broken, we need to send you on to the hospital to have it set, or whatever it happens to be. The vertical forward is when there is that primary care center is created before you go to the hospital. It's like a stopgap. So some people only have to go as far as the primary care center, and then others go on to the hospital, which is further away from the consumer. So, and that's called vertical forward integration. That's when the hospital creates this primary care center. They can take care of a lot of the business that would have jammed up the hospital. and then only the ones that need to move on to the hospital move on to it. Now they have something called vertical backward. Let's see, vertical backward, which is that's when you acquire operations that are further from the consumer. Now, let me give you an example of that. Let's say there's a multi-specialty group of doctors, and they've been referring their patients to some large hospital, maybe that's some distance away, or maybe they're having issues with them, conflicts, whatever it happens to be. So this group of doctors decide to build their own hospital. And so everybody, all the patients that they are seeing will then go to their own hospital that was built by them. Now that hospital is further away from the consumer because the consumer starts with the multi-specialty practice, and then if they need more, they go to the hospital. So when that hospital was built after the multi-specialty practice, then that is considered vertical backward because it's moving away, it's moving back from the patient. Okay. Okay, we have covered most of the stuff. Something's wrong here. I'm going I'm going to skip on over to the one that says evolving channels in healthcare, because this is something that, again, is changing in today's changing landscape. Give me 1 second. Let me back up just one and talk about, hang on 1 second. Like I said, I got two computers going. I want to be sure I don't miss anything. Okay. When you're looking at these different types of integration, you have three common forms, which are the corporate vertical, which combines the production and the distribution of a product. And this is when, like, for instance, there's a Penn Medicine, which is a company. They have more than 50 primary care practices. So they've that's a corporate vertical, which they have the medicine, but they also distribute it. So they have the main doctors, but they also they produce the medicine, but they also distribute it at these primary care practices. And they have the doctors. And so all of it is done within one company. Then you've got if it's administered vertically, this is when corporate activities without common ownership. That's when hospitals are employing their own physicians and staffing their own outpatient and diagnostic centers. And they even have them in airports, believe it or not. I've not seen one in an airport, but the book talked about several airports. I think Atlanta was one of them that actually have these primary care centers in the airports. I would hate to think that you're traveling sick like that. You'd have to go to a hospital or a diagnosis center while you're in the airport. Contractual is when they have agreements with distribution channels on the same level and they share services. So this is done pretty often with, let's say you've got small hospitals, and they don't offer everything. Maybe one of them offers a maternity clinic, a maternity care, and another one offers orthopedic care, whatever. They share services. So they contractually have contractual agreements that they might, if patients of one type come to them and patients of another type go to the other one. And that way they can offer more services and still stay within their system. Make sense to y'all? Okay. I don't hear anybody hollering, so I guess it does. And then the final one is franchising, which is this links the elements of manufacturing or provisions of the product or service. And you must be trained and operate just like the original. Franchising, there's a lot of franchises out there in the real world. You know, McDonald's are franchises, Baskin-Robbins are franchises. And what you have to do is you have to be trained and you have to operate just like the original. There's a company called Doctors Express. I know there's one in Waco, Texas. And all of the ones, if you go to Doctors Express in Waco, Texas, or in San Francisco, California, or wherever it happens to be, they're all going to operate the same because they're franchised and they're trained to operate exactly the same so that the same quality of service theoretically is given everywhere. Okay, it is 10 after 8, so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute and look at y'all for just a second. Are we doing okay? I know I've given y'all a lot of information. Everybody hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I love it when y'all answer me. Sometimes I'm looking at these, these pictures and these names, and I'm thinking, oh, I wonder who's here. So I'm always happy to have y'all talk to me. All right. Well, here's what I'd like to do. The rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. I can continue, or I can give y'all, like 20 or 30 minutes to work with your proposal. What would y'all like to do?
Work with our proposal.
Okay. I kind of thought maybe that's what the morning class chose too. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send y'all to breakout rooms, and I want y'all to stay in there for at least 10 to 15 minutes. And then if you get through or you feel like you're, need to work on it some more and meet later, that's fine. But once y'all, get everything to where you need it to be, then y'all are free to go. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms and let y'all self-select. And let's see. Okay, the rooms are now open. If you're not on a Cal State email and you need me to push you into a room, just let me know and tell me which room you need to go to.